because there are allegations that the Republicans are orchestrating these crowds. And what's your reaction to that, response to that?
Just untrue is my reaction. People should be allowed to go to a town hall no matter what side of the aisle you're on, and people have the right to voice their opinions. And just because the opinions don't agree with the administration or don't agree with the topic doesn't mean we shouldn't be allowed to be there, or anyone shouldn't be allowed to be there.
I think the problem that most people have, though, is with the expression of those opinions. Colleen, what's been your reaction as you've been watching these crowds assemble?
Sure. Well, absolutely. I don't disagree with Catherine that people who have an alternative viewpoint, who want to voice their opinions or suggest other alternatives, should be at these town hall meetings and their voices should be heard. But what's not acceptable and what there's not a place for in this sort of dialogue is for people to go into these town halls specifically to disrupt the dialogue, to shout down congressmen, to intimidate them, to inflate their numbers. That's not anything that these town halls are meant to be, and it's, besides being plainly rude, it's also anti-democratic, and it's driving people away from the political process instead of bringing them in.
It's when so many people don't usually go to town hall meetings,
right.
And what they're doing, and I saw that in some of the commentary that you showed, and reading some of the newspapers. These are everyday people, you know, and a lot of them are uncomfortable talking in the public, and they get nervous and they get scared, and if they don't think that their voice is being heard, your normal reaction is to raise your voice, and raising your voice is not disruptive. So I think we need to make sure that we are allowing everybody to voice their opinion. When we talk about people, you know, aggressive force, I remember our Connecticut delegation went down to the presidential convention, and they actually got physically accosted. That is completely unacceptable, and I don't believe any Republican group would ask for that kind. But we're just asking that people are allowed to speak their minds.
And I really don't. I mean, personally, have a problem with people yelling. I mean, so affecting change is not always a polite process. Rich, what are you thinking as you're watching all this?
Well, it's tremendous late summer political theater, number one. It does provide a lot of fodder for cable news and news broadcasts to show some nice video. But I think one of the points that's often lost, you know, in this debate is the fact that we're seeing a new counterculture emerge. We're on the cusp of the 40th anniversary of Woodstock, and folks are celebrating a counterculture, but from the last century. And what these protesters are doing is nothing more or nothing less than what the Yippies did in Chicago in 1968 with their version of political theater. The whole world is watching, and language like that. And those folks back in the 60s, when they were protesting, were pretty violent too.
Right.
And there's also a lot of talk in the media about how the right wing is breeding some sort of violence. And I think it's important to point out the left has its own record of violence from the late 60s and early 70s with groups like the Weathermen in fomenting domestic terrorism. So I think that this is all part of this vast political theater in America, and the key is to keep it from becoming violent.
Right. I mean, obviously, the more people who are engaged, the better. Colleen, what are your concerns, frankly, about having these kind of disruptions, as some people call them?
Well, I think on an issue as important as healthcare, we shouldn't be talking about political theater. We should be talking about conversations between our elected representatives and the folks who are genuinely concerned with the way our country is going, with the way that things are being handled, also for people who agree with the way in which our country is headed and the decisions that are being made. But what I don't understand and what I don't think many people appreciate are the folks standing up in the middle of these town hall meetings screaming, for example, that Senator Dodd should take a bunch of painkillers and wash it down with whiskey. I don't know what kind of constructive conversation that lends itself to, but I don't think that I'm in the minority in that.
Right, yeah, when you start engaging in this sort of performance art, which is American politics, it's been saturated in performance art from day one with protests. The key is to keep the discourse from becoming or metastasizing into violence, and language does trigger violence, and words do matter, words do count. So the leadership of parties, political parties, need to, at times, call their followers and supporters onto the carpet for engaging in violent language, because that always precedes a violent act. Not to say that that's going to happen now, God forbid that it does happen. But the media plays a role in this too, because the media is amplifying the excesses.
Right, we're showing every time there's a disruption.
And so what happens is the excess becomes the new normal, if I may use that term, in terms of the viewer,
Right.
and that's not actually the case.
Right, if someone can get on TV, they're gonna certainly get on TV. But the key is people really believe that they're not being listened to, that their congressmen, that's why they're screaming at their congressmen, because they're saying, you're not listening to us. And they go up in Washington and they pass bills, you know, in midnight, thousands of pages bills. They don't know what they're passing. And we read it in the newspaper, and people are like, I don't want them to do that again. I want to stop this. There's a town hall meeting in my town. I'm going, and I'm going to tell them. In Avon, one of our congressmen had one, and the Hartford Courant said there was a mother there who chose not to work outside the home with her 3 kids. I don't think she was violent, and I don't think she was a mobster. Right. She was just, the same reason why I'm in politics is because we care.
Right, and I think Rich and I were talking about this earlier, we're wrapping up here, but that I kind of saw this level of participation coming from the campaign on both sides. You know, so many people were moved to act during the whole presidential campaign, and now they are seeking to act continually. So,
yeah.
Thank you.